All right, today we are going to talk about grammar, and we are going to talk about how we evaluate grammar. We are going to talk about grammar rubric, and which you see in front of you. But before that, again, as it was with the vocabulary subscore, we are going to talk about some prerequisites on what it means and what I expect of you while I'm talking about the rubric. And there are many of them, actually. I'm sorry about that. So before we talk about grammar, here are some assumptions. I need you, even before you start listening to this video and follow me and go with me through different structures, you need to easily, and that is, there's emphasis, easily distinguish between tenses in English. You need to know, for example, what a relative clause is. You need to know what conditional sentences are, and the list is not exhaustive. You need to be generally familiar or have some familiarity with the grammatical structures in English. Okay, that is the first one. Second one, you need to be familiar with parts of speech similar to vocabulary. What is a verb? What is a noun? What is an adverb? Etc. etc. You need to be familiar with the CFR framework to a substantial degree, same as with the vocabulary. You need to have had read the background units, grammar vocabulary, that's same as with vocabulary. You need to have C2 plus level of grammar. That is true because in order to evaluate a student, you need to be able to recognize the structures they are using. So I highly recommend that you have that level of grammar. And C2 inclusive. C2 plus is not exclusive to C2 plus. C2 inclusive. And I strongly recommend that you also are familiar with mood and voice in English, perhaps even aspect, and familiar with system of auxiliary verbs and system of modal verbs in English. We're going to touch upon some of that later in this video, but I recommend that you come here with some background, because I am going to assume some background knowledge. Voice, those notions are not particularly complicated. Again, voice, passive, active, mood, subjunctive, indicative, with them some optative, but not for English, not always, at least, an aspect of perfective and such. There's a lot to aspect, lexical, grammatical. It can be difficult. If you meet the criteria A, B, C, D, E, you can start, but I recommend that you consider a criteria F1 and F2 as well. All right, so if and only if you meet all those A, B, C, D, E, and hopefully you meet F1 and F2, then let's start. What is a grammar? And we will start, something we didn't do with vocabulary, but that's really important. So what is a grammar? Grammar, and it can be defined in multiple ways, which we'll see. Grammar, in my description, is a finite set of rules of language which creates an infinite number of licit structures. Licit meaning correct, right, grammatically correct. So those are rules. Grammar of language, they are rules. And I'm gonna give you some more definitions because this one might seem too complicated. There are also 3 definitions I have here from an article by Samuel Epstein, Susan Flynn, and Gita Martha Horno. A rule system that generates sentences. I guess it's similar. A set of universal principles with parameter values determined. Don't be worried about parameter. A set of universal principles and a particular set of linguistic laws. That should be very clear to you. Grammar is a particular set of linguistic laws, and your task is to determine, to evaluate to what degree the students are able to follow those linguistic laws. Information of licit structures. All right. An example of that is Professor Flynn told me to revise the proposal. That's a good grammatical sentence. And the linguistic laws, you might say, they filter out sentences like "to told Professor Flynn proposal to revise me," which is just a jumble of words. So the linguistic laws, the grammar of language, is something which makes words fit together in an order which you can recognize. It's also connected to hierarchical structures, which do not concern here. Even if you take parts of it, like to revise the proposal, and put it, in different places, that doesn't work still. To revise the proposal, told Professor Flynn me, does not work. You cannot deduce the meaning from it or adduce the meaning. So grammar is a set of laws which we know and which we expect the students to know, and we evaluate how well they know it. What is their mastery? I am going to quickly go through tense because it's a complicated system, and we are going to meet a lot of tense marking and tense generally in our levels of grammatical structures. And I'm gonna ask you now, and hope you pause the video, just think to yourself, how many tenses are there in English? If you Google it, the response will be wrong. I can tell you that. There are actually only three. Oh, hold on, only three tenses in English. There's a present, there's a future, and there's past. Somewhat anachronistically, there's past, present, future on a timeline, and you will see that. But again, there are only three. Those three do have subdivisions, different sort of kinds of themselves, and we're gonna go very briefly through each of those. So we're gonna consider present, and English has such rich system of such rich analytical system, rich system of auxiliaries and modals, that for example, for present you have present simple, present continuous, present perfect continuous, and present perfect. Present simple, as you can see on the slides, the slides are from the course I taught, I think 2 years ago. Present simple can describe a moment which happens habitually in the present. Present simple can also express a occasional action. So, for example, she goes to school is a habitual action. She exhales, or she, let's say, she swells, or something along those lines. She exhales, or is a good example. It's a one-time action, in the present. Present simple can also be, in rare cases, used to talk about the future. The train leaves at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Still present simple. Present continuous is talking about a continuous event, the progressive aspect. The continuous part is very important. The train is leaving now. I am writing now. He is walking now. It's all at the moment. It's all now. That's the core of this tense. Present perfect is talking about something which has just happened, or has relevance to the present. That is very cool. I have just broken the vase. That's one option. I have just written I have just submitted the test. That's one way to talk about. But it also can be, I have never been to Paris, or something along those lines. Something which has relevance to the present. And present perfect continuous is similar to present, a tense which is similar to present perfect, but is elongated, has this continuous aspect to it. I have never been visiting Paris, you emphasize it. I have been writing my test for a while now, but I haven't yet submitted it. You don't talk about the result, you talk about the continuous action, right? The continuous action. All right, going to past. Things are very similar. Again, you talk about past simple as is there a one-time action or a habitual action in the past? I used to go to school, or I went to school. I went to school. You can mean, by saying I went to school, you can mean either you attended school or you came to visit when you came to your hometown, the school you graduated from. Similarly, past continuous. It relates to a progressive aspect in the past. I was attending my recitation. Okay, I was failing my seminar, something along those lines. Past perfect. I had failed my seminar. It is about a moment in the past which happened before another moment in the past. How odd is that? And so we say that it's most often used, and you should watch out for that when you're listening to the students. They often forget about sequence of tenses, and it's important in English, and we do consider it as grammatical mistake. When you say my friend said that, it cannot be followed by my friend said that we will go to show tomorrow. It needs to be sequenced properly. So my friend said that we would go. In a similar manner, you cannot say my friend said that he watched a movie 2 days before, or 2 days before that. If an event happened before an event in the past, so he watched before he told me, he watched before he had a conversation with me, he needs to say my friend told me that he had watched that movie. Okay. And past perfect continuous is a scary beast. It is a continuous action which happened before a moment in the past. So my friend told me that he had been going out with this another gentleman, or something along those lines. Okay. In a similar, and I bet you will never hear past perfect continuous other than from me. Lastly, the future. Future, very similar. You have future simple, an action in future. I will go to the theater. I will go out with the gentleman, or something like that. We will leave at 2 o'clock. Future continuous. We will be writing a composition at 12 o'clock tomorrow within a specified time. Okay. I will be attending a series of lectures on binding theory, or something like that. Future perfect continuous. Well, let's consider future perfect. You will have something done by the time in the future, right? There's a moment in the future, you will have something done by it. I will have mastered minimalism by some moment in future. And future perfect continuous is a continuous action before some moment in future. Similar to future perfect, but a continuous action. So I will have been studying, the theories of syntax for 2 years in June, or something like that. Some of them have passive, some of them don't. Remarkably, you can find very contentious hypothesis about whether future perfect continuous has a passive form, because it is difficult. And proper formation of passives is another thing, but passives, again, we will talk about that when we see the actual structures. That's sort of very bare bone outline of tenses, because vitally and very importantly for everybody who is evaluating this little thing, the future, not little, but future can be expressed in such multitude of ways. It can be expressed through future simple, but nothing simpler than that. But it can be expressed through the structure of going to. I am going to leave tomorrow. It can be expressed through the train leaves tomorrow. It can be expressed through the structure to be to. I am to go to the theater tomorrow, which is another option within the present. You need to be able to tell within those, and you need to know whether a student has used a syntactic structure or a grammatical structure in a faulty way. For example, when a student says, I am to leave tomorrow, but you know that they actually mean something else from the context and you suspect so, you need to be able to distinguish those contexts. But again, that's just the background to give you an impression of how complex the system is, and you will not have trouble. If you speak English fluently, again, C2 plus the condition, you will not have trouble distinguishing between them, at least feeling them. I'm not saying you should know all of the names and such, you should feel them at least. Okay, here is our rubric, our lovely rubric, and it's pretty complicated, isn't it? We're gonna go through it as we did one by one. And again, the first question which we had, does the speaker, well, let's read it. Does the speaker use int GF while showing control of BGF? Again, scary abbreviations. And we're gonna, again, int GF, I wonder what could that stand for? I mean, obviously grammatical forms. We're talking about grammar. So we have 3 divisions between 3 three kinds of grammatical forms for the purposes of this assessment, and don't by no means assume that that's all we have in English. That's nonsense. GF, remember, it stands for grammatical forms in this rubric. So BGF for basic grammatical forms, ENGF for intermediate grammatical forms, and ADVGF or ADVGF for advanced grammatical forms. We have only three divisions really. And so looking back, we have it all over the place. Really, if we look at this rubric, we have, does the speaker use ENGF while showing control of BGF? Then we move up and we see, does the speaker use ENGF and show control of the BGF, even though there may be occasional errors for using BGF? It's all about those abbreviations. It's all about the levels of those structures. So I think the most useful thing to do now for us is really to go through the levels of the structures. I think we ought to really take a look and be able to, so that you know what every level entails and what are typical structures for every level, so that after that, if you see a student and you note some of the mistakes they did, you can then go to the list, which I think you will know very well, and say the student made mistakes in these and these kinds of structures. Henceforth, the student is of this level and such and such. All right. Basic grammatical forms, here they are. They are many. We will consider them one by one. Basic grammatical forms are for the levels A1 and A2. They are attempted and used at A1, A2. They should have significant degree of control for A2. B1 plus will have flawless performance. For B1 might be some errors. Okay, so here we have simple sentences, even without modifiers like standing the yellow at the metro. So I know he came, not I know I met a guy at the metro. That's different. I met the guy, that's it. Without anything else attached to it. So very bare bones structure, right? But still a correct one. So there are some sentences in English, some verbs which you are intransitive, he came or I arrived, which don't require anything attached to it. But again, subject, verb, object, students should, they cannot say I read. You need to say I read a book. In a similar manner, you cannot say I give. You need to say I gave Mary a book or something along those lines. I gave it to Mary, whatever form it takes. It just has to be grammatical, right? Subject, be adjective, noun. Structures like I am a student, he is nice, the weather is good, etc. etc. The weather is good sound, but still, very simple structures and simple sentences connected by coordinate. It's not coordinative, sorry, by coordinate conjunctions. And I mean, strictly speaking, or is a disjunction, but we'll just group them together. It's like I am a student, but I am a bad one. I am a student and I am a scholar. Very simple, bare bones structures. If you recollect from grammar, from vocabulary, we talked about levels of and conjoining two things was precisely the A1 level. So conjoining these two things is again for A1 here. Verb tense, simple present, past, future tense using will, be, going to. Important, building up on what we talked about, right? So it's present simple, past simple, future simple. They have command of all three tenses. And they future tense using will, be, going to. So they will express future. They will need to be able to express future using either will or be going to. So I either will attend a lecture on whatever on sluicing, or I am going to attend, not I will be going to. No. And present continuous, the other tense which should be. So that limits the toolbox of the students, right? Present simple, past simple, future simple, be going to, and present continuous. Only 5 solid grammatical structures, only 5 tense structures, right? That's not all. We have other stuff for basic grammatical forms. To continue, basic pronouns, they should, I mean, obviously, I am, well, I can join with am because they need to know present tense, right? I am, you are, we are, they are, he, she, it is, etc. If they use singular they, I commend them for it, but that's not really required. I don't think, well, I'm sure it's not required for A1. It's a bit different. That's a stylistic thing. So if they use for incognito people, you know, for somebody whose gender they don't know, do not grade them down. You know, they may use whatever they choose. Complete sentences. As I said, they need to already know that there are transitive, intransitive verbs. Well, use them correctly, not know the notion of transitivity. But I mean, she bought does not. In some contexts, it might be appropriate. In, I mean, rare context, but depending on what phrase, what did she do with it, and you might respond, she bought it, but you will still say it. In most cases. You need they need to have those structures, use them correctly. If they use an incorrect word, that's the lexical part of it, not grammatical. But don't confuse the two. It's very important that grammar is about laws of the language, which are structural, and vocabulary is about different stuff. Vocabulary is about the words you use and how correctly you use them, right? And if you go back to vocabulary section, when I talked about how the structure of the sentence is grammatically perfect, but the lexical part of it isn't. Similarly, we can have, as I showed with example of Professor Flynn, which was perfect lexically, everything fit together well, but it didn't make sense grammatically. Countability. Yes, you cannot say many money in English. That's just how it works. You cannot say many sugar. You cannot say many milk. And they need to know that by that time. They need to know the distinction between something is countable or uncountable. A lot of bags, not much bags. One of the girls, etc., etc., etc. Proper prepositions. Yes, in level appropriate vocabulary, and you see how it correlates with vocabulary, right? But if they make a mistake in a preposition, that's a grammatical mistake. If they use an incorrect verb or word, that's a lexical mistake. So when they say looking upon them, well, with look, almost anything you put in there, it exists. Looking for, looking at, looking to, almost everything exists. But again, going to sleep, going for sleep, going at sleep. I bet it does. It would be ungrammatical. So they shouldn't say going at sleep, unless there's some contextual thing. They should be using classic examples, using them appropriately. Simple direct WH questions. WH questions are formed by what, where, who, etc. And only one which has WH in it, but it doesn't start. It's not how. It doesn't start with WH, but it has WH in it. What are you going to wear? Where are you going? The structure of that they also need to know. Okay. Oh, we're not done. There's one more. Infinitive placement after simple verbs. Want, would like, need to read. I would like to visit Boston. I would like to go to Chicago. I want to read a book. The structure, an infinitive structure, to read, to go, to buy, after a verb, crucial. They need to know that at this stage. Some modals, hopefully they will know, can, have to, must. Have to, I would exclude from this category really, but the rule is, you can never have a to after a modal. You cannot say, they should not be able to say he must to go, and you will hear that. I bet you will hear that, because I did, and everybody else. I mean, it's a very frequent mistake, particularly with Ukrainian speakers. He must to go, totally incorrect. You will spot it right away. Subordinate clauses hopefully can join with something like because, or since, or something like that. We went outside because the weather was beautiful. There isn't anything too complicated about the sentence. They should be able to produce it, and that is already hinging on A2 levels. So that's already not A1, right? Sentences with clauses joined by that, and they are kind of subordinate. I know that you have a new house. I know that you must go, as opposed to I know that you must to go. Well, all of them together. And I want you to see, and we will look at the example at the very end, but I do want you to see and really watch out that in one structure, in one sentence, there can be whole abundance and a cornucopia of various grammatical mistakes, and because there are many structures involved, right? Do watch for subject verb agreement, and that is a part of present tense. He likes hamburgers. The ball is whatever, greener, etc. Beautiful. There are many colors, because people will say there is many colors, and it is actually a contested issue in grammar about there, but it is not contested about he likes hamburgers, she prefers going for a walk, to something else. Watch out for that agreement, for that particle s. She likes, he likes, people will miss it.